Well, good morning again. Welcome back to our study of the Gospel of John. We are resuming where we left off, which was John chapter 18, and we're up to verse 12 now, which begins the trials of Jesus. The opening of the chapter starts with the arrest of Jesus. Remember, we discussed the root question, the room question first, and then the root question second, and the observation that Jesus knew exactly what was going on and where he would meet Judas and under what conditions, even though the disciples were really quite lost at the moment, and even Judas did not, and the men with him did not expect to meet Jesus in the dark in that place, and were caught by surprise, and yet Jesus moved them forward and pressed the point, and also made the point of dismissing the disciples in protection of them. And so we pick up now with verse 12 of chapter 18. We're going to move through the entirety of the trials, and I say that because of course, it only finishes up chapter 18, and does not seem to cover a lengthy period in the Gospels. Nonetheless, the trials of Jesus have resulted in a great deal of study on the part of commentators and others who examine the various written laws of the Jews regarding their own sense of trial and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And the upshot of all of that Christian study is to point out and to observe how rash and how rude and how speedily and roughshod the trials of Jesus were, in order that they might dispense and dispatch with Jesus as quickly as possible. That brings up, of course, the whole question of the timing. Was it deliberate on their part? Did they want to have Jesus crucified in the midst of the Passover week celebration? Was there desire on their part to climax the Passover with this crucifixion? Um, I'm thinking. I mean, there's lots of opinion, of course. I'm thinking probably not. The reason I say that is because the machine happened much quicker than anybody else had thought it would. Even Judas was not prepared the night of the Passover to be the night of the Lord's Supper, to actually go out and do this. He had alerted the officials. They had paid him, but tonight was not necessarily on his mind, and so Jesus kind of had to drive him out. Go and do what you're going to do, and do it quickly. And so when Judas comes to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, time all becomes of the essence. They realize that Judas is saying, "Okay, now is the time to do this." Jesus, and the reason, I guess, is probably no more than simply to say, Jesus is on to me, and it's likely he will be skipping town if we do not move quickly. That would be Judas Judas' own surmising or considering of the situation. And it could also be that because Judas was filled with such despair and such depression leading to suicide, it could be that Judas, even though he was arranged to, he was ready to do this, nonetheless probably didn't realize it would take place so quickly, and the shock of it was considerable. Uh, the the arrest of Jesus, surely, but a protracted trial, a lengthy period of dealing with this in public, probably was what anybody and everybody expected, and nobody got. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees, also being caught off guard, decided that time was of the essence, because Judas was persuaded time was of the essence, and that they needed to move before Jesus left town or slipped out of their fingers, so to speak, out of their grasp. So they immediately dispatched the soldiers to go with Judas that very night to arrest him. It could be that Judas went first to the room, thinking he might be able to catch him there, and then took the road to Bethany. So if we take the traditional place of the claiming today to be the place where the Last Supper was, and we go from there toward Bethany, we'll catch up with Jesus in the Mount of Olives, then that makes sense. So we'll go with that, even though we can't be absolutely sure. That's what it all transpired. And yet he probably did not expect to see Jesus in the Mount of Olives. He was probably expecting to track him down in Bethany someplace, perhaps packing his bags, getting ready to get out of town. And so coming across Jesus in the Mount of Olives was a surprise to everyone. Then of course went the standing of Simon Peter and against this and the dismissal of the disciples, all taking place as Jesus not only predicted but choreographed. This is all according to Jesus' own will and own determination. And so they arrest Jesus. The rest of the disciples do indeed scatter, and they take him off for processing. Now here again is how quickly the Jews now they have him. So the question now is why rush things? As I said, there's commentators and other authors make a big point of saying that they break their own rules, they violate their own laws at every turn here. And why not just lock him up and be done with it? And of course, the reason for that has to be because they are afraid of the crowds and they want to stay in control. And it is just a few days ago, after all, that the Jews en masse welcomed Jesus into Jerusalem as a king, no less. And so to hold him in irons, so to speak, to put him in jail, to leave him there, would disrupt the entire Passover and perhaps turn the crowds against the Sadducees and the Pharisees completely. And if that happened and they wound up releasing Jesus to the crowds, they would lose everything. So they undoubtedly are thinking that we must act quickly, we must process this immediately, we must do away with this man as soon as possible, so that the crowds have the least amount of effect on our plan. And so I think that's the strategy that they use here. Now John is the only one who mentions Annas. Annas is the whole issue of who Annas is in character, as well as the role of Annas as high priest under the Roman control, is in the notes and the outlines for you to look at. Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, has his own sons as well. The high priest office technically is supposed to be a position the man has for life. And that was the way it was up until the exile, when both the ceremonial worship and the civil relationship of the theocracy was both taken away from the nation. And so when the return came and the temple was rebuilt and worship could continue, the office of high priest resumed. But because they were now in the property of other nations, that was governmentally under their control. So if Rome didn't like what was going on, they could replace the high priest at will, and the Jews could only try to manipulate that in one way, shape, or form. And the way they did that was, Rome had already given Annas a try as high priest, decided they wanted somebody else, and so the Jews supplied him with alternatives and said, well, these men are able and willing to serve, and so Rome would pick one of them. Went through all of Annas' own sons, and now landed to Caiaphas, his son-in-law, and so Caiaphas is the high priest according to Roman governmental acceptance, but of course, politically speaking, Annas is still in control, and everybody knows and respects that. But John is the only one that mentions the coming before Annas, and that affects the route that the soldiers take with Jesus. Do they go to a separate house first and then go to Caiaphas' house? And of course, the fact that they are in their houses of residence, does that complicate matters? And it's hard to say. Do the family, is Annas and Caiaphas in the same house? Is there actually a physical change? Those issues are discussed and debated in the comments. And where these Jewish trials take place does affect the story line of Simon Peter's denials. In the Gospel of John, the initial interview is taken place before Annas, and then after that, before he appears before Caiaphas, Simon Peter is in the courtyard of Annas, and there is where his first denial takes place. That's unique. The synoptics don't mention that. John makes a specific point of pointing this out, and you wonder why. John kind of stretches out the evening, giving as much information as he can, in spite of the fact that he doesn't really spend a lot of time in the Jewish trials. We read more of the information about the false witnesses and about the dialogue that goes on from them than we do here in John. So John is more interested in the dialogue between Christ and Pilate, and the tension and the what's going on there, which we'll get to. Simon Peter's first denial takes place as described, and it is dramatic how Simon Peter does this. He is a broken man. We have to remember that. It's not just intimidation. It's not just anxiety. Simon Peter is a broken man. That goes all the way back to John 13, washing with water. This is humiliating for my master, my teacher, to do this. And then he tries to get on board, do it, wash my head, my hands, and everything, and then to be rebuked even at that. Peter just can't do well tonight. There's just he can't score with Jesus at all, and that's deliberate on the part of Jesus. Jesus is putting Peter down at every turn, and Peter has, with healing of the wound, which is not recorded in John, but nonetheless, stifling the defense of Jesus that Peter was ready to do, was the last straw, and Peter is a broken man. And so emotionally, I'm not sure he's even on board with what's going on. He's just simply ruined. He's brokenhearted already, and he follows. John is much more committed on a passive sense. He's not defending. He's not fighting the Romans or the Jews in this regard, but he's trying to stay with Jesus. Peter is also, but he may be following John more than Jesus at this point. Peter stays behind. He's not sure he's welcomed, and not sure Jesus even wants him anymore. He just doesn't know where he is. And then comes the pressure of that accusation. You're with them, and at this point he's afraid for himself. He is apart from them, so he could get arrested and shipped off or killed in his own right, and he wouldn't have any association with Jesus to call upon. He would get lost in the sauce, and so I think that he's definitely reaching out here for just time. He just wants time. No, I'm not. I'm not with them. Just leave me alone so that I can focus on what's going on. And the interview with Annas doesn't seem to be very thorough or in depth. It just is just a kind of a sizing up of the situation. And once it gets Annas' approval, Jesus goes to appear before Caiaphas. And it's there that we have really the bulk or the sense of Jesus' trial before the Jews. This goes from verses 19 through 24. Uh, the high priest begins to question Jesus, and Jesus will have none of it. He says, I don't need to defend myself. You've heard me. I don't preach in private and sacred. I broadcast my preaching to everyone. You've heard me. You know what I preach. And that's regarded by the guard as being belligerent. And so Jesus is rebuked, and yet he says, what have I said that was wrong? Which of course is right, because there isn't anything. Annas is done. He sends him to Caiaphas, and the process before Caiaphas is much more elaborate, and in the process of that, the two other denials of Jesus take place. I mean, by Peter, and it's there that the cock crows. And I think that Peter is so much into himself and into protecting himself just so he can witness what's going on. I'm not sure he is even aware of what it is until the cock crows, and then it's like all of a sudden the words come back to him. Now it's not in John, but it is in the other one of the other Gospels, Luke, maybe, I can't remember which one, where Jesus turns and looks at Peter. He hears the cock. He doesn't hear Peter. He hears the cock crow, and he knows what that means. He knows what Peter's done, and looks at Peter, and that just destroys Peter. And he goes out and he weeps bitterly, and it's done. He's done. Humanly speaking, Peter's life is over in many ways. What keeps him from committing suicide that night has to be the grace of God. He can't see anything different between himself and Judas. It's one of those things, and of course that's a real lesson that we have here in the electing power and authority of God over men, for good or for ill. That it is not up to man to choose God. It is not up to man to defend God. It is not up to man to seek to destroy God. He can do nothing. Man can do nothing unless it is allowed him by God. And that's true for Judas, and it's true for Simon Peter. Jesus has to send Judas out to do his work. The man is condemned even before the foundation of the world. That is very clear. And so the two are brought in parallel study for the reader, for the deliberate purpose of seeing Jesus' words in John 16 particularly, in my 13 through 16 particularly, when he says that you are the ones, you did not choose me, I chose you, and prayed for you, John 17, did not pray for the world, and the world includes Judas. He is the pot that does my bidding, but you are different. And remember that when you falter and you prove yourself shallow and foolish before the Lord, is that we disappoint God more than we could possibly ever know. And yet he is committed to staying with us because he has chosen us before the foundation of the world, even to, not just in spite of our sinfulness, but even unto our sinfulness. Jesus knows Peter must do this. He must even drive Peter to the point where he will do this and deny Peter the opportunity to defend Jesus. He sets him up, and yet still Peter is mine. He doesn't cast him off. He doesn't, when he looks back at Peter and says that convicting confirmation, it's not like you are not one of mine any longer. You are. I knew you would do this. You belong. You are dead to me. Kind of thing. Instead, it's just the opposite. He looks to make the connection. Peter is broken, but Jesus will not let him go, and it's because Jesus will not let him go that Peter will get through the next 3 days and even be restored. So the cock crows, and the conviction is clear. So the interview with Annas, you have the dialogue with Caiaphas, and you have the the briefness of that interview, that trial in the Gospel of John. You can get more of it in the synoptics, but then John is ready to talk about the trial before Pilate, and it's the trial before Pilate that John really wants us to get a feel for, and it is very, very interesting. Um, the concern Pilate has for his standing, his relationship to the Jews, his answering to Rome, is all swimming around in his mind, and he doesn't exactly know how to handle all of this. So from the very beginning, Pilate becomes concerned not for Jesus' innocence, but for his own. Pilate is playing a chess game here where he is in charge of dispensing justice, but he doesn't want any part of dispensing that justice. And, having said that, there's two incidences that are recorded in the other gospels that do not show up here, and it's very interesting why that's the case. First is the dream that's reported from his wife about the man. Be careful, be on the lookout. Perhaps John didn't know about that or whatever. But the other one is the washing with hands. That at the end of the trial, the Roman trial, Pilate washes his hands and says, "I am innocent of this man's blood." Those are much more dramatic. But what John focuses on is the interaction and the strategy that Pilate has, not to say in a judicial sense, I declare him innocent, but I'm going to turn him over to you. Pilate doesn't want to become guilty of this, and he is saving himself here, and he's doing so at every single possibility. So they come before him in the early morning. There had been, the arrest that night, the interview before Annas, the trial that took place in the middle of the night with Caiaphas, and then they bring him early in the morning. And there's some debate and some discussion as to exactly what the timing of this. But the early morning is what's recorded in the Gospel of John, and they come to his palace to present Jesus before Pilate for execution. The Jews are under the Roman government. They are allowed their own functioning to a certain level. They operate their worship, their ceremonial law according to the law of Moses, but Rome has control over who the high priest is, so they take care of that. And with regard to the civil law, they can function normally, but they cannot execute someone, at least legally, at least in the eyes of Rome. They cannot execute someone. And so, stoning somebody in a mob, like perhaps might be seen with Stephen later in Acts, will probably be, they'll probably turn look the other way when that happens. But with somebody like Jesus, I think the Jews also don't want the blood on their hands. They want Jesus to die because he committed heresy according to Jewish law, but it's not the Jews that want to nail him to the cross. They want the Romans to do that, so they can then blame the Romans if they need to for the death of Jesus if the crowds react in a poor way. Lots of politics going on here, and politics is something we're all used to right now. So they come early in the morning, and immediately they set the stage of distance with Pilate. They do not come; are not friends with Pilate. They want nothing to do with him, and they come up to the very edge of his property, and say, "This is as far as we can go because of our laws of sanitation." And which is really just a line. Yes, there are lines of purification and all this other stuff, but those are minor. Would not affect anything. This is saying, we need you to come to us. And so Pilate, first step in saying, okay, I don't want any problem here. I'm not going to walk away from this, have them blame me for something. He comes out to them and he begins the interrogation. They just simply refuse to participate with him on principle. They just don't want to. They immediately begin to separate themselves from this. So they have this man that has been on trial. He's guilty. We want you to execute him. We want you to take charge of this and execute him. And so Pilate goes outside and he begins his investigation of this. And immediately he draws suspicious. First of all, it's happening so fast. That's not usual. He knows that. He also realizes the staging they're doing. This is a big deal. And so to put this man up in the midst of Passover is kind of weird. And he's immediately suspicious of this. He draws a political line himself, first thing. He says, well, this is really Herod's jurisdiction. So he sends him to Herod. He says, I don't really want anything to do with this. So he sends him to Herod. Herod counters that by sending him back on another jurisdiction concern. Herod doesn't want this on his hands either. And so he comes back. Jesus comes back. And at that point, Pilate realizes he's stuck. He has to make a ruling here. He has to make a determination of Jesus. And he immediately begins to declare him innocent and say, and to dismiss him. And he's hoping the Jews will back down. He's hoping they'll give up on this. He says, I even give you permission, go and kill him yourself. And they won't, no, we want you to do the job. It's the politics is thick and fast here. And so Jesus has to take charge. They're in a loggerheads. Neither one is budging for the other. And so Jesus has to take charge, and he answers Pilate's questions. They say, he says he's the king of the Jews. And Pilate says, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus doesn't have to say anything. He didn't. He started by not saying anything, but now he realizes, okay, I need to say something. And he says, yes, I am a king. And of course, that competes with the whole thing with Caesar. And so now the box is squeezing tighter on Pilate. And there is some dialogue question about the translation there and what it is that's actually being said. But the point is that Pilate doesn't want to get caught in this bind. He doesn't want to, he says he could kill Jesus because he claims to be a competitor with Caesar. That would be enough, supposedly. It still could come back on him. So he pulls out one more card to play to put it on the Jews so that he doesn't have to worry about that. He puts it back on the Jews, and he says, okay, there is a tradition. There's no other record of this tradition. I don't know if he's making this up or if it's really true or if it's something Pilate did the year before, but he makes a big deal about this. He says, there's a custom, I have of releasing a man at Passover because I'm such a great, benevolent governor of you, and I do this every year, and you know this. And he says, now, okay, we'll say that Jesus is guilty, but because it's Passover and because of this custom, I will gladly release him on that custom. And he even gives them a choice. He doesn't want them to just say, no, we want you to crucify him. He gives them a choice, and a very radical choice. It's not just. Well, let's see. Let's get another example. The tax collector. What's his name? All I can think of is Matthew. The small guy that's called out for the sycamore tree. That tax collector could have violated the Roman. Could have been caught pocketing money. Could have been thrown in jail. He could have been brought before Jesus and choose between these two, as if this isn't a big deal. But instead of just a minor violation, he goes to the far left side of things, and he brings Barabbas up as a choice. Barabbas is a known violent man, and this should be simple. He thinks they should choose Jesus because they don't want Barabbas set free. Barabbas is a bad guy. But he does this on purpose because he wants them to either choose Jesus, and he doesn't have to worry about it. Barabbas is worthy of being killed. Who cares? Who cares if he dies? But if they choose Barabbas, then they are saying that it obviously the Jews are making it the point, we want him to die, and we take the blame, and that also carries over the business, the dialogue about we have no king but Caesar. That is convicting on the part of the Jews, and yet it's precisely what's going on. So Pilate is bringing up the question of whether or not they will choose between Jesus and Barabbas, and that's a very deliberate point, because he's saying, now if you choose Barabbas, now I know, now I can say I had nothing to do with this, which is exactly what he wants to say. Okay, well, that's chapter 18. We're finishing that, and we'll move on to chapter 19 next time. And we're moving right along, and that's probably a good thing at this point. Get this over with. So let's pray. Father, I thank you very much for the information we learn about how much Jesus is in control, and how, Lord, nothing takes your will off track, even when it comes to the death of Jesus on the cross. We pray that you would encourage us with this when we face challenges and politics in our own world that seem to turn our world upside down. We know that you are in charge. We count on that. We must know it, and we cling to it. And we pray, Lord, that your victory would come out in the end. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.